What would the Colts do if they had to redraft their own current players? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Jake Arthur from horseshoehuddle.com, riding solo today. And, today I think we're going to break up the monotony of the 2023 NFL draft process just a little bit. We've got about a week left. Let's just throw something different your way, right? Using the Colts 2023 NFL draft slots that they've got in each round, which of their own players that they've drafted from the last decade would they pick in those spots? So I put a couple ground rules in there just so it's not a big free-for-all. So the Colts have to pick a player in the round that they were originally drafted. So, you can't in the second round go get Rodney Thomas or whatever, for example. They also can't pick a player in a slot that is later than they were actually picked within that round. An exception to all this is in the fifth round, the Colts haven't picked at 176 or later within the fifth round in that last 10 years in this time frame that we're doing. So I made an exception for that because they have made several fifth round picks overall. So first up, the Colts obviously picked number 4 overall in this year's draft. So just kind of looking at some of their most recent first round picks from the last decade, I think you still got to go with Quentin Nelson there, who was picked with the 6th overall pick in 2018. For me, this was a somewhat close call between Nelson and Kwity Paye. But Quentin Nelson, the only reason that this is even really a discussion is because he's been a bit banged up the last couple years, right? So he's had the back injury, and he hasn't looked like the same dominant Quentin Nelson in the last 2 years that he did in his first few years. And hopefully, that's just kind of something hopefully that's something in the past. Hopefully, he's a little healthier this year and everything. And when it comes to Kwity Paye, he himself has been a bit banged up. He had an ankle that caused him some issues last year. If he'd already gotten to be like a 10-12 sack guy, I might actually reconsider, just because I think we all know that an effective edge rusher is going to have more value than a perennial Pro Bowl guard really any day of the week. But still, you really can't ignore Quentin Nelson's resume. His first few years from 2018 to 2021, he allowed just 4 sacks total. That's 1 each in his first 2 years and then none in his third year. That's outstanding. He did miss 4 games in 2021, 2 years ago, when he kind of started that little slide. Didn't miss any last year, but still was not himself. I think he's probably still the Colts' best offensive lineman overall because he just always is. Quentin Nelson playing at 75-80% is still going to be better than a lot of the offensive linemen throughout the league. But yeah, you want to see him for the price he's being paid. You want to see him playing at that Hall of Fame caliber level. I had a quick interaction with Duke Manyweather on Twitter not too long ago, and he had mentioned some guys currently in the league who are locks for the Hall of Fame. Mentioned Zach Martin, guys like that. I asked him about Quentin. I was like, is the only thing keeping him from being on your list the fact that he's been banged up? But otherwise, he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And he said absolutely. So from guys who really, really study offensive line play, train these guys and know it, they still absolutely love Quentin Nelson. But yeah, 4 All-Pros in his career, 5 Pro Bowls. He's been decorated in some fashion each year in the league. So again, really can't ignore that resume. Moving on to the 35th overall pick, round 2, another guy who's been banged up. I think you're going to go with linebacker Shaquille Leonard still. Now, his issues right now to me are more worrisome than what Quentin Nelson's has been. You dealing with a back surgery last year that never really saw him regain full comfort in that lower leg. Those two things were kind of married hand in hand. And things sound more optimistic this offseason, but I think you kind of have to see it to believe it first. It's tough because just like Nelson, he's been on a Hall of Fame trajectory to start his career before he got banged up. He barely played this year, just a few games, so these stats may not still be the same case. But going into last year, the beginning of Leonard's career really was unparalleled when you consider just the amount of stats he could stuff on that stat sheet. So far through his career, 549 tackles, including 30 for loss, 15 sacks, 17 forced fumbles, 7 recovered, 12 interceptions, and another 31 pass breakups. That's all for an off-ball linebacker, basically doing things that a stud at each level of the defense would do. So I think you still got to go with someone like that. Off-ball linebacker, kind of like guard again, isn't really a cornerstone position. But when you have a player that has special abilities like that, I think you still go there. This one was really close with me over Jonathan Taylor, who was picked number 41 back in 2020. Now, running backs don't matter. Everyone's heard the saying. But to me, someone like Taylor is a special player. Back in 2021, when the Colts second half of the season, the team no one wanted to face, they were really hot. Don't forget, they kind of had to hide Carson Wentz for a good portion of that. And if you don't have Jonathan Taylor playing at a ridiculous level, that team stinks and probably looks a lot closer to what they looked like last year. So Taylor is a difference maker, and I think the Colts will probably think that way as well when it comes time to dealing out a contract extension. If he looks healthy, recovered from this ankle injury from last year and looks like himself again, I think the Colts probably will value that. They want to draft and develop their own guys and reward them with new deals. And, for running backs, it can be really tough to get something beyond your second contract. So he'll probably want to come back to the Colts if they offer him something worthwhile. Moving on to the third round, the 79th overall pick, which the Colts have from Washington this year. I'm going with linebacker Bobby Okereke. Yes, he did just leave to go to the Giants, but, going through this offseason, he still counts in this exercise. This guy is truly someone who developed and got better each year. Statistically, he increased each season. He was only a full-time starter for 2 years, but was just awesome during that time. He averaged a legit 140 tackles in each of those 2 seasons. And I'm really excited to see what he does with the New York Giants over in Wink Martindale's defense. A really kind of sneaky defense. They like their players to be multiple. They like to do a lot of different things with those guys. So he's an athletic, long, his game has diversity to it. He's a playmaker. So I'm interested to see what the Giants can do with him there. Rounding out in the fourth round, Grover Stewart back in 2017 was the 144th overall pick. That was, right off the bat with Chris Ballard in 2017. That was one of his best value picks that we've seen to date. Grover Stewart, nose tackles don't put up those gaudy stats, but Stewart has been awesome. Like the Colts run defense since he's been in Indy has been really good, above average pretty much that whole time. And he's a huge part of it. I think, guys like DeForest Buckner last year, Stephon Gilmore, Leonard, those guys everyone comments on their value to the team. I think if you take Stewart out of this lineup, that's a huge issue in itself. And again, I mentioned nose tackles don't really put up stats, but he actually had a big statistical year last year, which has been his best year. And these stats, even for a 3 technique, which do put up more stats, would be really good. Career highs pretty much across the board, 70 tackles, including 9 for loss, 4 sacks, another 7 quarterback hits, a fumble recovered, and then 3 pass breakups. So Grover Stewart, that's been one of Chris Ballard's best draft picks overall. Finding a guy like that on day 3 who is one of the best at his position still all these years later, that was a heck of a pick by Ballard. So we're going to move on to rounds 5, 6, and 7 in a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you guys by Ultimate Football GM. So you guys have heard us talk about this mobile game plenty. And if you've ever thought that you would make a good GM, then you've got to give this game a try. It's actually not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. The draft is about to start in reality. Again, we're about a week out. And with Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the whole thing for your team and molding your roster from top to bottom. Locked On Colts listeners, you guys get a 100% free boost to your franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps, one word, in your game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in your app store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, so we're going to move on to the 5th round now. So, 5th round. They've had some good picks on day 3 as well. And again, this guy is not still with the team, but he was really good for the Colts in his first 4 years. That's the Swiss Army knife on offensive line. That was Joe Haeg. So he was picked 155th overall back in 2016. And when he faithfully left the Colts that one off season, I believe it was for the Buccaneers, it was basically for the Colts down to LeRaven Clark and Joe Haeg. They had both of those guys on expiring contracts, and they gave the deal to LeRaven Clark. Probably we're going to have to pay a bit more for Joe Haeg. But Haeg left, and, the rest is history. He hasn't had the greatest time either since he left. And the Colts obviously have been searching for a player like him since he did leave. In those first 4 years, he started 35 games for them between 2016 to 2019, including the preseason. I believe we actually did see him at all 5 spots on the offensive line. So that was a guy who could do anything. Certainly with the issues the Colts have had on the line these last couple of years, someone like that would have come in pretty handy. Going on to the 162nd overall pick for the Colts, still in round 5. They have this pick from Buffalo in exchange with the Nyheim Hines deal. Danny Pinter, who was picked at 149 back in 2020. So, yes, obviously the Danny Pinter thing at right guard as the starting right guard this year did not go well. But the reason the Colts even felt confident to do that in the first place was because how steady he was filling in for Ryan Kelly at center anytime that Kelly would get hurt in those first couple years. So even as a rookie, Pinter looked pretty good at center. I think we now realize that's his home position. I think he could probably start at center and be fine. But yeah, guard, he's probably lacking the sand in the pants, lacking the power on that one. But still, really good value pick for the Colts. If he had to start, he could at center, of course. But yeah, it's you're looking in the mid-5th round after all. So good pick there for the Colts. At number 176, which they have from Dallas, which is a compensatory pick in exchange for Stephon Gilmore. Again, we had to make an exception for this because since it's at the end of the 5th round, the Colts really haven't picked that late. We're going to add in E.J. Speed to this one, another linebacker. Back in 2019, he was picked 164th overall. Kind of like Bobby Okereke, but just not to the volume yet. This guy's gotten better each year. He's been a special teams standout for former coordinator Bubba Ventrone each of his first 4 years. Got a shiny new contract this year. Things have peaked, in this last year. He really earned it, finally getting some starts. 63 tackles, including 7 for loss. He had a sack, 2 forced fumbles, and a pair of pass breakups. I mentioned he has been a good special teams player for Ventrone. He's even scored a couple touchdowns off that too. So I actually don't see that changing much under new coordinator Brian Mason, who also has a big play special teams unit as well. The only exception I could see to that is with the loss of Okereke and uncertain future of Shaquille Leonard getting on the field. If Speed takes on like a much bigger role as a defender, which is fine. You want to see that as a team who drafted him, if he's going to play his home position and hold it down and maybe sacrifice some special team snaps. Again, that kind of speaks to the development of the player. So that's really good. Moving on, the Colts have no 6th round picks as part of some of the trades that they've made in the last year. They have 2 in the 7th. The first one is number 221. This one is a layup for me, and I think you guys would probably all agree. We're going with linebacker Zaire Franklin. Now, I feel like we've drafted 400 linebackers in this exercise, but the Colts are really good at drafting linebackers. So Franklin was picked 235th overall in the 2018 draft. And man, he's been awesome. He kind of blew up out of nowhere last year in his first full season as a starter. Before that, he was a team captain and a special teams ace. But with the injury to Shaquille Leonard and the Colts ushering in a new defense under Gus Bradley, Zaire Franklin was the starting Mike throughout the season and was really, really good. 167 tackles, including 12 for loss, 3 sacks, 6 other quarterback hits, 2 forced fumbles, and 6 pass breakups. He's generally an unknown player to NFL fans around the league, but if you assign those numbers to most other guys who have notoriety, like a Bobby Wagner or someone like that, that gets you in the Pro Bowl. His numbers were really, really good. And he actually spoke to us in the media last week, and he was asked about that. He's like, it didn't come out of nowhere. That's just what it looks like when I'm given a full season to start, really. And, if that happens again, which, by all accounts, it looks like he's going to be a full-time starting linebacker again for the Colts. It might be time for an encore. Really, the only thing missing is probably adding more wrinkles to his game in pass defense. Okereke was their best linebacker in coverage, so you'd love to kind of see Zaire Franklin maybe get a little more comfortable in that area, a little more effective. He's not a total dud, but he doesn't play to the level that Okereke did. And our final pick in this exercise, it's pick number 236 that the Colts have from the Buccaneers. They got this pick in the Grant Stewart pick swap last year. Rodney Thomas. He was a rookie last year, the safety out of Yale. He was picked 239th overall. Now, this guy came out of nowhere, and I thought he was a really intriguing story. So at Yale, he played linebacker and cornerback, and then in 2020, he didn't have a season because it was a COVID season. The Colts drafted him at safety. They were perhaps going to play him at cornerback, but he stayed there at safety. I didn't see a lot, honestly, from him in training camp up to about midway through, but the Colts had him pretty high on the depth chart. And then when the preseason started, you could see why. He wasn't like flying around and making all these plays in the pass game yet, but he was tackling everything in sight. He was a really sure tackler. So I figured he would make the roster, maybe not contribute much, but you could see that the guy could tackle somebody and be really good as the last line of defense. And then it was week 3 for the Colts last season against the Chiefs, a game they improbably won. And against Patrick Mahomes, Rodney Thomas, this rookie 7th-round pick, again, out of Yale, was thrown into the lineup, and he did really well. He had a couple nice pass breakups against Mahomes and was a key part to the Colts winning that game. He went on to start 10 out of 17 games, so he saw action in every game, 52 tackles, 6 pass breakups, but 4 picks. So for the Colts, safeties have not really racked up the interception numbers in recent years. And really in the NFL in general, I don't feel like it's as common anymore to see safeties with 4 interceptions or more. This guy's got good ball skills. His range and just speed overall is awesome. I'm really looking forward to seeing him perhaps as the new full-time starting free safety for the Colts. It's interesting to see what they're going to do because they obviously drafted Nick Cross last year. He's a strong safety. Julian Blackmon is a free safety in title, but him and Thomas could probably play a little bit of everywhere, all over the lineup. Rodney McLeod has not been re-signed yet, so I'm really interested to see what the Colts do at safety this coming season. They could still do something in the draft, but all I know is I definitely want to see Rodney Thomas all the time. Like that guy earned a full-time starting role with the Colts defense. So I'm going to wrap up here in a moment, but first a word from another one of today's sponsors, FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, baby, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so that is it for us today, everyone. Hope you like this little break from all the who are the Colts picking, what quarterback is it going to be. We'll be back with you tomorrow to keep getting into all that, because again, the numbers have shown, whether it's us writing at horseshoehuddle.com or here with you guys, that's still what we all care about, quarterback. And until that pick is made by the Colts in the first round, I think that's still how it's going to be. But Zach and I have some really good guests planned for the next couple of weeks from now up into the draft. So definitely stick with us each day here. You regulars, we appreciate you sticking with us all the time. If you're new, if this is your first time listening to the show, of course, go ahead, hit subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter and everything. Follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts on YouTube and wherever you guys listen to podcasts. We would also love your ratings and reviews as well, because that's what helps us get on the charts. So we will see you guys tomorrow.